And welcome into another post-game edition of Spits and Suds. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, tough loss. The first loss at the American Airlines Center for the Dallas Stars as they fall to the Anaheim Ducks by the score of 4-2. I'm Gavin Spittle of 1053 The Fan. Very pleased to be joined by our man David Castillo tonight to talk about this and Stars in general. How are you, David?
I'm doing good. I think for all of the hot takes following this game, at the end of the day, teams get goalied. They're trap games, and that's what this was.
Boy, I'm so glad you said that. And by the way, you can reach David at David Castillo. He is one of the many writers for D Magazine, and he also has a great Substack called Stars Stack. So, David, very active in the Stars community. And I agree with you. It's like, let's not overanalyze this. Came out sluggish in the first period. But, I was saying throughout this game, it's like, yeah, Stars did not play great. And I think if they played to the level which they would, we might see a different story. But honestly, David, I thought Anaheim was really good tonight. I just thought their passing was crisp. I thought their forechecking, kind of got the Stars on their heels. They had some great zone time. They broke up a lot of plays. Kind of like Stars struggled to get offense going, as far as regularity until the third period. So, and you're right, good, really solid goaltending. So, I thought overall, Anaheim was the better team tonight.
I mean, I'm not going to go that far, but I will. Let me just say something. When you say good goaltending, no, the best goaltending, right? Dostal is 11 goals, at least as of this before this game. 11 goals saved above expected, leading all goaltenders. That's above Vasilevsky, Anderson, of course, Ottinger. It's above Shesterkin. So it's important not to undersell. Even though I don't think that he necessarily had to be great. I do think he was incredibly good. He was elite. There was one shot in the third period that was a pretty dramatic redirection that he got, and I was like, yeah, this guy's for real. This guy, maybe the next Shesterkin.
Listen, I might jump the gun, but I do think Anaheim is starting to get those pieces, and they might be a few years away, and they have dealt with some injuries this year. But you can't take these teams, and I don't think the Stars took them for granted. But anyway, let's start with the sweaters of Anaheim. I thought those were great tonight. You know what? I'm just going to call it like it is.
Listen, I miss the Disney 1996 for whatever it was when it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought the orange really popped on the ice. I will say on a positive note, I really liked the game of Maverick Bourque. I thought that fourth line was the best line tonight for the Stars, but Maverick Bourque specifically, I think he was very aggressive, and not that we haven't seen that, but it was almost like, that was the Maverick Bourque you wanted to see as far as sustained aggression, really puck hunting, getting some quality shots on the net, kind of agitating at times. I just thought it was his best overall game so far at the big level.
Your ability to cover every single angle after a hockey game really always throws me a little off rhythm, talking about the orange of the Ducks jerseys, which I personally didn't like, but I'm glad you did. For me, the jerseys are a hard sell to begin with. There's really no jersey other than the Mooters that really kind of gets my blood pumping and amped.
I cannot believe you said that.
But yeah, it's got to be ironic. But anyways, Maverick Bourque, it's for one, him earning a spot next to Ben and Stakehoven was great. Kind of less so that it kind of came at the cost of Wyatt Johnson getting bumped down. But this is kind of typically, or this is, I don't want to say typically, Maverick Bourque has been a fire starter wherever he's gone, except his first season in the AHL. But once he got going, it became a story of the second half. And I think that's I'm hoping that's what we're going to see with him from here on out, because he's a player that's just he's so nuanced. And as somebody that was kind of frustrated seeing him like lose his spot to Oscar Beck, which is not at all like a diss towards Beck, I was just like, oh God, here we go again. So like for me, it was just great to see him. I think he had like several good performances kind of prior to tonight, but tonight really felt like kind of, I don't want to call it like a coming out party, but it really felt like DeBoer and Bork kind of aligned in this like, hey, I'm ready, coach, and the coach kind of responded in kind and giving him like a few more shifts and some extra minutes next to elite players.
Let's talk about Jason Robertson, David. What are you seeing or what are you not seeing? It just doesn't even seem like you're hearing him much on the ice. 3 points in his last 11 games.
Yeah, I mean it's worst parts of the Bible stuff. And I wrote about Robertson, did some film room analysis on Robertson at the Substack. I want to say I think it was last week, because we've seen this come in. So when I was like rewatching games for Robertson, I think one of the things that really jumped out, one, we can say that probably the injury to his foot is, I'm sure, lingering, has something to do with it. But when I was rewatching tape, I think what I'm seeing is a player who is really having to like grind his shifts. And I think there are parts of his game, like if you look at some of like I think his passing's actually been quite good. And the issue has been, well, Hintz is not firing on all cylinders either. And then of course
Right.
they had a consistent, third party, right? The way Joe Pavelski was in previous seasons. And so there are certain elements of Robertson's game that I think are still there, and it's a little bit of unluck. But there are definitely elements of his game that are lacking. He's taken way less shots than he was in any of his previous seasons, and it's hard to kind of. I still think, even though I think he'll kind of jump out of it, he'll snap out of it. However, it's not going to come without something either DeBoer or Neil does to kind of get that top line going, because again, it's not just Robertson.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think one of the things that we brought up the other day, Sean and I, is that I almost want Jason Robertson to go back to the basics. And what I mean by that is I think Jason Robertson, the puck used to find him. So I think, one of the things I really like about Logan Stankoven, obviously he's a massive puck hunter. But the other thing I like about Logan Stankoven is, for his size, he loves to get in the dirty area. And I think Jason Robertson needs to do that a little bit. Just kind of like go back to the basics. Have him, I remember Tyler Seguin when he was in a slump and a puck hit him and went in the net. And it was like, oh, and it almost like rejuvenated his scoring. And I think something like that needs to happen with Jason Robertson.
Well, I mean, one thing I'll add to that, because I agree, but one thing I'll add to that is that I do think there is. So this is just nothing but theory crafting. This is just me spitballing. But when I was rewatching some of the tape, one of the things that I felt jumped out to me is that I do think there's also an element of the rest of the league recognizing that Jason Robertson historically is an elite player. So when he's on the ice, we're going to be a little extra tough on him. And what I see is a lot less of, right, one of Robertson's kind of typical moves is to enter into the zone and then kind of make that lateral cut, looking for like a trailer or,
Yep.
Somebody like, and for me at least, I've seen teams play him much more aggressively, where before they'd kind of, play for the pass instead of the play. Now they're just like playing the body. And it feels like teams are kind of wise to, some of his kind of traditional tactics. And so even though I don't think that explains full scale, like, his issues, I think there are a lot of different things happening at once. Nonetheless, I think that's also kind of another piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Wanted to talk defensively, kept the same lineup as the other night in Minnesota. I mean, forwards, they did the same, but Brendan Smith getting the start and Nils Lundkvist once again sitting Matt Dumba back in the lineup. I'm wondering if maybe we'll see Nils back on Wednesday.
No, man, it's okay. This is not funny. Like, I shouldn't laugh because, like, man, I want to see Nils Lundkvist do well, but it's like, dude, like we're back to square one, same as square two, and
you really think so?
I don't think, because to me, I think right. So that's two scratches So essentially, we've normalized the scratch of Nils Lundkvist, just like what was done last season and the year before. And I think the other thing too is that I feel like Smith and Dumba together, being sheltered, have created, as much I don't want to say hate to say it, but like I think they've created like a decent pair. They
Yeah.
actually had a pretty good game, uh, analytics wise against Minnesota. I want to point that out because I'm sure, like, right, the thing that we all remember is them just chucking knuckles and getting into a UFC match. Much better fights than, of course, the Paul Tyson fight, by the way. And so that has earned them a lot of goodwill, and I think it'll continue to earn them goodwill because that's not an element that Lundkvist provides. And this is the new look. This really is the blue line of the future. Lian Bichsel, who could easily play games this season, provides something very, very similar.
Well, I think the way I thought it was described was they wanted to get Dumba back in the lineup, and obviously Minnesota, I think, worked, and it kind of got some. I think it was good for the room to put Dumba back in essentially his hometown of Minnesota, where he played for 10 years. And I thought he played pretty well and drew a fight. But I was a little surprised I didn't see Lundkvist tonight, especially against the speedy Anaheim Ducks. So yeah, we'll see, because I don't
I
think Brendan Smith tore it up tonight. I'm not saying he was bad, but he did get beat on one of those goals against the boards.
Oh, I agree. To me, it is only a matter of time before Smith and Dumba like have Smith and Dumba games, and that's not like being like that's not like me being a jerk. It's just like, well, they're older players, man. I mean, this is what happens to players that have kind of really like largely aged out of the game, at a position that's very, very difficult. It's just that it's hard. Like if they were going to bring in Lundkvist, maybe this is the game you do it because, like, yeah, sure, they just got off a win, but you're also playing like a really terrible team. And yes, Anaheim has good goaltending. They have a lot of young talent that I think makes them a team to watch in the next couple of years, but they're not there yet. And so it's really going to take mistakes on Smith and Dumba's part to bring Lundkvist back in, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the same as Lundkvist being in the doghouse, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, that's disappointing, because I certainly think he has been one of your better top six. Granted, he did not log the minutes, but I personally feel as though he's done nothing wrong to draw scratches.
I agree, by the way. Like he's been he was like before the first scratch, he was as good as he had ever shown himself to be. In addition to the fact that he was also just really one of the better blue liners, period.
Yeah.
Quite a few guys were struggling like to start the season. Lundkvist was not that guy. Had one tough game, and that's why I was just like, all right. it was fun while it lasted. It seemed like we might believe.
Yeah.
X-Files style, and then poof.
Well,
I personally think that's it.
and the other thing is, you did get 1 point from a blue liner tonight in the goal from Esa Lindell. But other than that, completely shut out as far as points on your blue line. And then you look at the shots. Brendan Smith had 2, Dumba had 2, Miro had 2. Then for 26 minutes on ice, I need more shots out of Miro.
Can I real quick? Can I just, because this is like segues into a seamless plug?
Your
Which I'm
show
going
as
to be
well.
writing. I'm going to be writing about Thomas Harley either tomorrow or possibly Wednesday.
Nice.
Most likely tomorrow for D Magazine, and I think Thomas Harley is actually fine, and I thought he actually looked really good tonight. Can I say that on the positive end? I don't know if
I don't
your eye
disagree.
test is the same as my eye test, but
No, I agree. I thought he did look good tonight. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I just think that we didn't see that Sagan, Marchment, Duchesne line explode. As far as, I didn't see one line that dominated the night. And, that's going to happen from time to time. And I mean, yeah, Duchesne with a beautiful third period goal. Yeah, I think Casey DeSmith let one by that he shouldn't have. But that's going to happen as well. So I just think it was one of those things, as we started the program with, it just wasn't their night. One thing it's almost like we're used to them failing on the power play now.
Well, before we get into the power play, can I just say, like, how much, or can I ask, do you feel like, and this is where I do think that, like, usually analysis like this after a game, I don't like put too much weight in. However, an issue that has been lingering all year, and that we can probably expect for that to be an issue, I think maybe the entire season. I mean, are you really expecting a ton of production from this blue line?
No.
I mean, don't you think it's going to be an issue into the playoffs as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a massive issue. And I think that's something. How do I say this without coming across too hard? If I'm paying someone 8 to 8.5 million, I need point production.
Do you think, sorry, real quick, do you think that's why they gave him that money though, for point, because they think his point production is more capable than he's shown?
It's a great question. I think they gave him the long-term contract on the potential that his game would vastly improve and continue to improve. He was already great. I think the potential was there to be elite. And I'm not questioning the contract at all. I personally struggle to call number 4 elite. I call him a good player, a really, really solid player that I'd love to have on my team. I just think I was expecting more offensively, and I don't think like we can do hashtag free Miro anymore. I think Miro needs to free Miro.
Well, and that's kind of like why I asked that question, because I feel like if you were given Heiskanen money because you thought like maybe he had a next level, then to me that is a problem with the team's logic. I don't think Heiskanen has ever demonstrated. I think he might have maybe a slightly more offense in him than what he's previously shown, but he's just never going to be that level. And I think if the team was splitting hairs, or if they thought that was then surely we're watching the same player that you drafted, because that wasn't true about him now, last year, the season before, or when he was in juniors, or not juniors, but when he was in the Liga. So
I'd still have him as a top 10, 12 defenseman in the league. So I just, that's just me. I personally, we talk about eye test, David. One of the things that I see on the power play is how aggressive the opposition is as far as rushing to the point and attacking the Stars' power play. They're not backing into like a protective diamond, so to speak, or a square. Basically, they're attacking, and I don't think there's fear. And maybe that comes down to puck movement, but I will say, call me old school, I absolutely love that threat from the point, and they just don't have that.
Well, because Heiskanen isn't that player from the point.
Right, exactly.
I think the impression is, to me, I think it comes down to perception, right? You have a number one defender, and what do most number one defenders do? Well, they play at even strength. They play in all situations, they run the power play, they play on the PK, etc. And for Dallas, that's our number one defender. He should be able to run a power play. Well, he can't. That's not even really a criticism. I just don't think that's in his nature. It's not in his DNA to be able to walk the blue line like John Klingberg. He doesn't have the same vision. He simply doesn't have the same shot. I realize, telecasts will make a big deal about him like working on stuff and like, oh, isn't that slop shot great? No, it's not great. It's never going to be great. And it's great to see him try to improve like things in his game. But for me, like it would make more sense to have, even though Thomas Harley like hasn't been perfect, like I'm not trying to gas up like Harley is like, oh, well, actually he's been elite. He struggled too. Like a lot of people, players in the blue line have struggled, but I would sooner see 5 forwards on that top power play unit or 4 forwards in Harley than to kind of pretend like Heiskanen is the player that he's really not. And if he was that, he would have shown it already.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe my expectations are just high, and maybe it's like an unfair comparison because he was the same draft as Cale Makar. It's
We're
just,
gonna.
I'm just saying that I think that plays into the equation. It's human nature when we see what Cale Makar does, and he was drafted a little bit lower than our guy. I'm not questioning the stars. I'm just saying this is like my human nature. Um, and I think he's a really, really good defenseman. I'm just saying, like, I have to figure out as I make my way to the playoffs, A, how to fix this power play, and B, how to get consistent scoring.
Well,
Like, and see who's the guy that's going to step up this year. When I look at this team and I'm like, okay, who's the first guy I shut down? And they have a lot of depth, but didn't we think maybe it was going to be Wyatt Johnston that was going to be that factor this year? Turns out it's Matt Duchene.
I mean, for the time being, like I'm still Duchene's going to slow down. I think it's going to be a question of like how much he'll slow down, and what I'm just honestly like I still want to have that Cale Makar versus Heiskanen discussion. That to me is what's going to like get people to like stop listening to you, Gavin. Is if you say Cale Makar is better than Miro Heiskanen, which I agree with. But also, like, I do think that there can still be.
Wait, so you think Cale Makar is better, right?
Of course, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
Cale
so
Makar
I think
is.
Cale Makar is a generational player.
Also, can we also, just call out our fellow Stars fans here? How many of y'all truly watch Cale Makar? I see so many people still like
Yeah.
criticize his defense. Like, Cale Makar is not as good defensively as Heiskanen, but he's still a capable defenseman. I
Very.
mean, this is
He gets it
a
out of
guy
his
that,
zone fast.
yeah, and this was a guy that was able to like play Connor McDavid like one on one. Like he's got defensive chops, and unlike Heiskanen, he throws like a hit every now and then. Like he can be that physical like assertive player.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I think even though I think plus Cale Makar has a cup. I mean, come on, guys. Um, I do think that Heiskanen can still be because he's like unique in his own way. Because Heiskanen is truly a shutdown defenseman who just happens to have some puck moving skills, elite puck moving skills, but that's not his. That's not the brain that he's equipped with. I think there are still ways to take advantage of that. There's still ways to leverage that to improve the team because I mean, for all that I know we're kind of being a little extra critical, but Dallas is an elite defensive team. They have been one of the best defensive teams, not just this year, the year before, and the season before that. And so really, what this is well, what can kind of take them to that next level? And that's why for me, man, like the move was not bringing in more forwards or anything like that. It was trying to like, go big with like Rasmus Anderson or something like
Yeah.
that. A puck mover. To me, that's what Dallas really needs. They need a puck mover. Because I mean, really, when I think of puck movers, I think of Harley. I don't think Heiskanen's a puck mover. And so really you just have one guy that
Right.
generates offense from the blue line. And that's why your blue line doesn't generate the offense you think it should.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, maybe that's why they went out and tried to get Nils Lundkvist a couple years ago. Maybe they thought he'd be that puck mover.
Well, I mean, they've had a long time to kind of make that assessment in the
I
context of a team trying to win now.
I no, I agree with you. I just think like it's tough because I even look at the Central Division. There are a lot of good D men in the Central Division. So, it's one of those things where once again, Stars fans, I love you. And please don't think that I am like overly negative on 4. I just think that there has to be like a consistent scorer and or playmaker on this team, and I just feel as though there are two things. I'm looking for that person to step up, and here's the other thing I'm looking for, David. This is anti-analytics. Yes, agreed.
Oh God.
Anti-analytics.
Don't do it.
I have to. When you play like you do in the first period, someone's got to make a big hit. Someone has to do something. Someone has to crash the net and cause a scrum. Basically, what I'm trying to do is create energy that I'm not seeing on the ice otherwise.
Listen, Boston is about to have like the fire sale of all fire sales. What would you give up, Gavin, for Charlie McAvoy?
I like Charlie McAvoy. Yeah. I don't know what I'd give up though, because that contract's pretty high.
Oh,
But
I
I
didn't
like.
realize it was. I didn't realize he was paid that much. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, let me check on that. But I I like him. I mean, I think he's a good player. I just, who do you give up or what do you give up, and cap wise, can you make it work? That's going to be um the toughest thing.
Well, I think Dallas will have. I think according to Puckpedia, over like 6 million come trade deadline. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like I would pretty much give up like virtually like anything for Charlie McAvoy because I'm kind of
Yeah,
like,
I think
well,
I like him a lot. But um he is signed through 2029, 2030 at 9.5 million a year.
oh my goodness, that is that's way too. I mean, I love the guy. I think
Yeah,
like one of the top five best defense. I would put him in the top
right,
five. Top five.
right.
However, I didn't realize
Yeah.
he was that much. I,
Yeah.
I don't know why I
You know,
say that. It's like top five, but he's overpaid.
if hockey fans wonder what does Gavin Spittle do on a Friday night, I just think of random names and look up their salaries. It's quite the quite the endearing social life, isn't it? But
Man,
it makes
you
for good
are.
programming when I can know that Charlie McAvoy gets paid well.
Well, I mean, that's why people listen to you, Gavin Spittle.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. All right, let's answer some Twitter questions, and we got a lot of them. Katie Thompson, thank you for listening, Katie. She says, I admittedly didn't follow last regular season as closely as this year, and stick taps to y'all for making me feel engaged, even though I can't watch most games live. Let me just say, I'm going to stop for a second and say, anytime any of you use stick tap back to me or David, I absolutely love you, because that is like, I love that. So thank you, Katie. Did it feel like last year as far as having concerns that this team might be kind of mid? I mean,
Ooh,
it's a good question, Katie. And I am seeing some tendencies that I also saw last year. Power play, obviously, being one of them. Scoring consistency is another one. So I think Katie brings up a pretty good point, David.
I mean, it's definitely. There are a lot. I mean, I still think, and I'm usually not the optimist. I still think this is a really, really good team. However, this team is not being judged as a good team or a top three in the Central. No, they're being judged as a team that can possibly win the cup. In that context, absolutely. Like I mean, mid is pretty tough, but I mean that's um, kind of what a lot of the underlying numbers show, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
one, they're a team that is not very good offensively, um, are not getting a lot of shots on net. And also, if you even look at their expected goals against per 60 minutes of even strength play, they're mid two, right? So they're keeping shots down, not necessarily, they're allowing a few more high danger chances than you'd like to see. And really, the thing that's keeping them propped up has been really that early stretch of Jake Ottinger's play. So I would say that's correct. However, I think broadly speaking, we're still looking at a team that has shown itself to be elite in the grand scheme of things. I think the question is really, well, how much did losing Tanev hurt the Blue Lions prospects long term? And have they really replaced Joe Pavelski? And I think people kind of saw, I mean, technically Logan, I mean, not really, you can't really say Logan Stankoven, but I think there was a lot of hype on Maverick Bork.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to really find that confidence and groove, but definitely not there.
I was going to bring up Pavelski, and I'm so glad you did, David, because whether it's true or not, we all have to wonder, how much did Joe Pavelski mean to both Hintz and specifically Robertson, as far as, because it's not just the scoring, and we all know toward the playoffs and in the playoffs, it seemed as though Joe slowed down and he had a really rough playoffs. But one of the things that Joe was so good at was creating space. And that is not something that a lot of players can do. Some players fight for space. I felt as though Joe Pavelski was one of the best in the league for his size as far as creating that space specifically in front of the net. And he was always a net front presence, even if it was a high tip. He created really good screens. So, I was thinking about that through the game. So I'm interested, I don't know if we'll know the answer, but we certainly might have to bring it into the equation as a factor.
Real quick, I want to add, because that's a great point. And what I would add there is that I think it says something about not just Pavelski, but also Hintz and Robertson. Don't forget, Pavelski also had the best seasons of his very extensive career with Dallas next to Robertson and Hintz. So to me, I think they were a very unique situation. This was like a specific situation of just like a perfect hive mind, just kind of working in tandem, where all three in their prime got the best out of one another, take any one piece out, and now you can. And also that was prevalent during the playoffs as well, right? I mean, it's once Pavelski was gone, Hintz and Robertson struggled, and even though I think it's certainly possible to kind of find somebody else who maybe can offer something similar, but we definitely are in a kind of scenario where it's like, well, man, how much was Pavelski in his prime, or not his prime, but like his tenure with Dallas, like essential to their production as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Sky Maverick 21. Should the Stars consider moving to D pairs of Miro Essa, Harley Labushkin, Bischel, Nils Lundkvist? Also, when will Pete DeBoer finally reunite Robo, Wyatt, and Rope? It seems foolish that he hasn't already, as they've seemed to work together before, and all three are sucking right now.
Well, to the first point. Hold on, what was the first?
This is going to be tough because.
Yes, by the way.
To take a step back, you have 7 guaranteed contracts as far as defensively. Could you pull it off with some cap finagling? Yeah, you could. But you're essentially sitting Brendan Smith, and you're also sitting Matt Dumba. So those are your 2 D-men that you've been sitting. It would be Miro Essa, Harley Labushkin, Bischel, and Nils. I think there's a possibility you could see that maybe next year.
I think we need to forget about the logistics and just ask the question, what is your best top 6? I absolutely think that is the best move. Like, I think, and by the way, like, for those that aren't watching, Leon Bischel, right, is the he doesn't have offense, but his offense is much more intentional. This is a guy that's on pace for 40 points his rookie year in the AHL. And so he is, when he does make the roster, he's going to stay. And it's not just because, well, he can be mean and nasty and throw a big hit. It's because he's a nuanced, talented defender as well. And no, he's not a puck mover, but I think he does have offense in him. And yeah, to me, that would be a superior blue line, like just bar none. Like, I don't.
No, I'm excited to see him. I really am. I thought if they didn't have so many defensemen, I think you could have put him on day 1 roster, and I think that would have been very fair. Okay.
The second part, right? Wasn't there another?
It was just talking about reuniting Wyatt Johnston with Robertson and Hintz.
Oh, that's not important to you, Gavin. You want to skip the second part of his question?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, we can talk about, Hintz needs to come back. Robertson needs to come back. I mean, we really probably should talk about Wyatt Johnston, and, it's coming up to January 1st, and that's when he exploded last year. So let's hope he can do it again.
Well, I think and this is where, Gavin, the eye test fails. This is where analytics can come in and show us the light, which is that there are a lot of underlying numbers for them as a trio, as well as on their own, that pretty much like just big neon letters, kind of like last year, when Detroit was winning a lot of games that they shouldn't have, and all the analytics were like, hey, watch out, this team, do not touch, do not buy, sell immediately. And to me, this is the same thing. Like, there are a lot of underlying numbers that that show that these guys are gonna break out soon. That doesn't mean they will, and that's like the thing that I think is important to kind of, when it comes to some of the specific and fancier stats, to understand, which is that these are not predictions of what's going to happen. It's just simply added language to understand what could happen. And so I would expect them to start producing. I think the real question is, well, are they going to produce in proportion to what Dallas needs in order to be cup winners or cup contenders?
Yeah. Steven at Steady Rhythms, kind of predictable loss. That probably doesn't mean too much, except that their offense and finishing still isn't as strong to pull off ridiculous comebacks like last season's. Wasn't exactly a terrible performance, just bad puck luck. At least Bork was a monster tonight. Oh, and Dostál is a real deal monster. That's not just a random goalie. He's consistently the main reason the Ducks have been in any game this season.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Anaheim has been really bad away. Like, ignore goals against and look at how many shots they allow per game, shots on net, expected goals. They're not good. They're one of the worst teams, but but they have one of the best goalies in the league, and that's just unfortunately Dallas found out the hard way.
No, you're right. I'm a big Radko Gudas fan. I don't know if you are, David.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
Good analytics.
Oh my God. Absolutely. I love it. And like I said, I know they've been faced with, some injuries this year, but one of the players on the ice tonight that I'm just fascinated with, I really like Troy Terry as a player.
He's awesome.
Yeah. I think Vetrano is a hard worker and stuff. But, I just keep my eye on, and I'm like, okay, will he blossom with another team? Trevor Zegras. I mean, and maybe it was the wraparound goal that just had us all fascinated, but he's 23, 17 games, only 4 points. And we're talking about a guy that had 2021, 22, 61 points, 22, 23. 65 points. Then last year, he only plays in 31 games because of injuries, and he only had 15 points, and now only 4. So I'm fascinated that, like, we talk about Jason Robertson, and are we worried? If I'm in Anaheim, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like a sharp decline.
It's Zegras, I think is a good example of. I'm trying to think of. He's like, to me, Zegras kind of is almost like a reverse Pierre-Luc Dubois, where Dubois like had some really monster early seasons and then just completely like flatlined, experiencing something of a renaissance in Washington. Zegras kind of sort of had the hot start and then, kind of had these like, follow-up seasons. I honestly I think even though Zegras is not, he's one of my favorite players offensively, but
yeah,
his defense has, been an issue for some time. I know he's improved defensively, but he's absolutely a player. Like, just watching him, like the points are gonna come, and some team is gonna trade for him. And I'm trying to think of like the last player that like a team traded for at their lowest, and then that player went ahead and just absolutely blew up. I mean, there's, I'm sure, plenty of examples, but whoever trades for him is going to get an absolute, is going to turn him into Jason Spezza because the talent is there. I think, and he's a player that has shown improvement in areas of weakness, which you don't see a whole lot. So to me, like, Zegras is awesome, and I think he's going to be fantastic for whatever team that is smart enough to turn. Like, can you imagine Florida trading for him?
No, I know. Absolutely. He's got this year and next year at 5.75, and then he's a restricted free agent. And, like I said, still young. So it is, You're absolutely right. You know, I mean, he was good before, but I'm going to go way back on this. I felt as though Pittsburgh got Chris Kunitz and he kind of blossomed. Granted, he played on the same line as Sidney Crosby, but he was like that key to that Stanley Cup teams.
Yeah, it's like the classic. This like Blake Coleman is often used as like the gold standard
Good
for
one.
like
Yeah.
a trade deadline pickup. But yeah, Kunitz is like way better because that was a hockey trade, if I recall correctly, and
Yes.
those
Our friend um, from Spit and Chicklets, Ryan Whitney, was part of that trade.
Yeah, and those are the trades that I'd like to see Jim Neal make more of because yes, he made the Sagan trade what feels like 30 decades ago. But I think that's what he has to have in him to kind of to sort of level up, perhaps.
Boy, you're right. I mean, we love our local players, and this is not a knock on anyone, but I agree with you, David. I think to get, you need to give. And there are a lot of young players, but I would not mind if you get the right player that provides that spark and that, because sometimes it's just a dynamic that you don't have. It's not necessarily an indictment of the player that you give. It's more of, I need that piece to fit. And it's a big risk because you're trading away a really good player. But at the same time, and kudos to Jim Nill, he's been able to flip a Gurianov for Dodonov. He's been able to get players that have made impacts for not much in return, like a Max Domi on a playoff run, or pieces like that, or a Matt Zuccarello, getting him for not much a few years back. And we all wondered, is Zuccarello going to re-sign because he looks so good? So Jim Nill has done a really good job, bringing in those pieces. Tanev is another one. But I would love to see kind of that big stars trade. That would be interesting to watch.
By the way, just to address the trade that you're asking for, which is we trade Miro Heiskanen for Trevor Zegras.
No. I actually,
I'm kidding, of
it's
course.
really funny after what I said about Miro. I'm not trading for.
Totally joking. But what I was really going to say is that I think this uniquely kind of ties into back to the Joe Pavelski discussion, which is that when you think about like kind of the profile of Pavelski in his best years with Dallas, it was something that Dallas doesn't currently have, which is a genuine playmaker. Zegras is a genuine playmaker.
Right.
That's his profile through and through. And no, of course, they're not the same players. However, that is something that the Stars are missing offensively. They just do not have those wheelhouse passers that that you really need, especially like come playoff time, where the space is there's just a lot less space. Being able to kind of create space is not just about body checks and cross checks in the corners. It's also about like how well you pass and timing. And man, Zegras, he can be a little too fancy, kind of like Jason Spezza, but he's still a really, really just brilliant playmaker, and I would love that person.
Yeah, I think if you could give me like a power play specialist, which I know they're extremely valuable, because even if you look like last year power play goals, and you got Reinhart, Draisaitl, Stamkos, Kaprizov, Kreider. I mean, those are all marquee players. So, it's not like those teams are just going to give them up. But if you can get me someone that's going to kind of spike this power play, then I'm kind of intrigued, because I think that's one of the things. If we want this team to truly go over the top, I think we got to get this power play going.
But I mean, I think I'm someone that has been a little bit of a power play apologist. Now, that does not mean I am necessarily a Steve Spott apologist, because his numbers in the playoffs are quite spotty. Obviously, pun intended. But at the same time, I am sort of a big believer in climate versus the weather. Under Spott, Dallas has had a really great power play, top 10 both seasons prior under DeBoer and Spot, and they also had really good underlying numbers in the playoffs. And we saw some of that lack of luck when Jason Robertson hit the post in that power play against the Edmonton series in overtime, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not. Do I agree that yes, Dallas could absolutely use a proper power play weapon, not Heiskanen taking random shots from the point with very little power. No, like a proper, sort of someone that really specializes in the man advantage play. But I don't necessarily think it's kind of just a matter of like, oh well, Spot's not going to get it done. They're going to get the right bounces, and no, it's not going to come just from some magical Christmas land regression.
Right.
But I do think they'll find a little bit more puck luck, in the near future.
Yeah, I would agree. And like we both agree they're a good team. Crow Wi-Fi, the Battle of Victory Plus was won by the Ducks tonight. I'm happy for Pat Verbeek. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, good win by Anaheim. That is funny, a Battle of Victory Plus. All right, Martin Crooms from across the pond in England. It's funny, we all talk so much about beating teams close to us in the standing, Wild, Jets, etc. The fact is, points against the Ducks are worth just as much as against those quality win teams. Frustrating. We go again. The only thing I'll say, Martin, is that when you're playing within the Central, it's a 4-point swing. And anytime you play the West, it could be a 4-point swing as far as like wild card race. But that's, I think, what makes the Central Division games a little bit more valuable. But you're right. I mean, you got to beat the teams that are in front of you. But I will also say I can't remember a Stars season because there's not one. And you can name the team where you're not going to lay an egg against the lesser opponent throughout the year. I mean, that's just going to happen. Like the Stars got swept by Ottawa, and Ottawa was no good. But for some reason, Ottawa swept the Stars, and that happens.
And by the way, this is not like a situation. But another good example is every year that the Toronto Maple Leafs are elite in the regular season, they always lose to Buffalo. Even when Buffalo, granted, they're still really bad, but even when Buffalo was even worse than they are now, Toronto Maple Leafs would lose. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, all these elite players, didn't matter what they threw at them. They would just lose to Buffalo. So absolutely. However, unlike those bizarre Toronto situations or like plenty of other examples we can use, there was a perfectly rational explanation. Lukáš Dostál is an elite goaltender, one of the best young goaltenders in the game, and this is the end result.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaliyah says the Stars are 0 for their last 14 power plays, and I feel like we haven't seen any improvement since the postseason. When do we start to get worried? I mean, Aaliyah, I'm worried. But I think you're very valid with bringing that up. Christopher DeHardy, and thanks for listening, Aaliyah. Stick tap to you. The law of averages says the Stars were bound to lose sometime at the AAC, and the hockey gods picked tonight to make it happen. It was an absolutely filthy goal from Duchesne. Nice to see Dumba get close to scoring one on that one shot. Yeah, I mean, it was a really, really nice move, an individual effort by, Matt Duchesne.
Real quick, can we just say, isn't it crazy that there was a time when Matt Dumba was known for his shot?
Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And if we want to go into Stars folklore, Ryan Suter used to have at one point a deadly shot from the point.
We don't want to talk about Ryan Suter.
I'm just saying when he was in Nashville and things like, I mean, or when he started in Minnesota, like the focal point of the power play went through the point, just kind of like what teams did with PK Subban.
I wonder how much of kind of what Dallas is doing is in keeping with maybe like kind of league-wide trends, right? It's and whether or not because we tend to view Stars hockey and Stars analysis from the perspective of Stars hockey and Stars analysis, as opposed to kind of what tactics are being used league-wide, and I do wonder if part of what Dallas is doing is tied to this was the big study recently with Prashant Iyer, who is writes for the Detroit Red Wings, basically looked at kind of why it's increasingly harder for teams to get shots on net. And this season is a career low. I do sometimes wonder if maybe for Dallas, part of what they're doing is just simply something that a lot of teams are doing, which is kind of focusing on the point because, well, hey, easier to like just grab a rebound, even if it's statistically less likely to go in or gain you possession, and better to just kind of roll the dice there than to get fancy and try to attempt the perfect rush attack.
Yeah, no, man, you said it really well. I think that's really well said. I also want to point out, and I'm trying not to be a cap nerd, but at the same time, I think we need to congratulate Jim Nill. When you look back at the contracts of Joe Pavelski and Matt Duchene, those are veteran contracts that have paid massive dividends for this organization. So I just wanted to stick tap Jim Nill. I mean,
Wait a minute. Can I be a jerk for a second?
Sure.
Are we going to do the same thing for the Matt Dumba contract? And I would say the Lyubushkin contract, but man, he's actually been solid.
The Lyubushkin contract is shocking. And Lyubushkin is, I was talking about this on Saturday night. I am just, I was wrong about Lyubushkin so far, and I'll gladly take that criticism. But I mean, I think a lot of people were criticizing that 3-year deal, and hopefully he can continue it.
I think most people were. I think it was like,
yeah.
I think the bigger issue was just having Dumba and Lyubushkin, right? Like, having them be a package deal was just a little kind of.
Well, and I think Matt Dumba, the one thing is it's only a 2-year deal. So, you have him this year and next. So if it doesn't work out.
Timothy Liljegren was right there.
No, yeah. I mean, you're right. You're right about that. There was some.
I know.
There were some pieces that were there that I felt were good alternatives. All right, Buck Sprinkles. Is it time to worry about Hinson Robertson? Another dud effort offensively, and both with lazy defending on the backbreaking fourth Anaheim goal.
That was bad. Like I was, I've been sort of kind of making apologies for Robertson's game so far, but he looked really bad there. I think that's what made me think like, hey, maybe this like foot thing really is a lingering problem. Yep. I mean, how much of that is true? That's just speculation though.
Yeah. And he says also Dostál for Vezina. Well, maybe in the future, sure. Couple others this year. One being Vasilevsky, who's having a heck of a year for Tampa, and the Stars have to face Tampa on Saturday night. So there are a few others, and including our own Jake Ottinger, who's having a heck of a year. Connor Hellebuck having an amazing year. Goaltenders are thriving right now, so it's pretty cool to see.
Boo.
All right.
That was all I had.
Will McKay says, didn't seem like they had energy, played flat until the third, and way too many turnovers. Yeah, I mean, they just didn't have their groove tonight, but that's okay. Get it back on Wednesday night, and then, play a tough game in Tampa. You have Tampa, and at Carolina coming up. Eric Lee. Yeah, I know. 2014. Let's talk about Robertson. Is he in the lineup this season? He is.
That was such an obvious joke. I don't know why I thought that was funny.
No, it is. I mean, it is. And you want Jason Robertson to play well. And man, I'm just so geeky tonight on contracts. But I think there is something that we have to talk about, and this is going to be interesting. So currently, Jason Robertson's 7.75. He does have one more year after this at 7.75, but then in 2026, he's a restricted free agent. So, we still got another year.
Is this where you make your Brady Tkachuk plea?
I will always welcome a Tkachuk on my roster.
I mean, at this point, Dallas doesn't have any leverage. Brady Tkachuk is having a fantastic year, and Robertson is. Yeah, it's tough, man. Like I said, I think we're all like a little. I do think what people are seeing in Robertson is genuine because we saw it in the playoffs and even a little bit last season, right? I mean, he's just compared to the year before that, just not the same. But I think for the most part, for the most part, right? We're still talking about a player that has been over 3 points. Again, this is like adjusted for minutes per 60, and nobody wants to hear about like per 60 minutes of even strength play, whatever the hell that means. I get it. However, the guy is still good. He's still young, and I really think when the season is all said and done, I don't think we're going to be looking back at a player. It's like, oh God, like, because he's on pace for what, like 40 points. That's not going to happen.
Right. Fuzzy Wuzzy Boom Boom checks in. The fourth Ducks goal. Both defensemen were slowly skating back to the play. Yeah, we were talking about that. Just disorganized, and Jason Robertson lost his man. Robot at Teapot MD. Very little like so far from the boys in green. And Crow Wi-Fi will end on this because I thought this was great. Is Netflix running Victory Plus tonight? Site is down for me. I think that's very clever. No, we did not see 20% and just buffering. So I actually did get a buffer tonight for Victory Plus, and I guess that's going to happen from time to time.
Right. Well, I mean, they had like the Anaheim and Dallas kind of going. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to have any sort of financial insight or wisdom into, what could explain it. I've, really got nothing to say. Why is this the note that you wanted to leave off on? Victory Plus glitches?
Oh no, I just think it's funny with the whole Netflix situation. And then
Gladiator 2 is about to come out, and you're talking about, hey, this question about Victory Plus. I don't get you sometimes, Gavin.
Yeah, well, I just think it's like funny. And then like one of the heads of Netflix puts out to their staffers, like, hey, everybody, this amount of people watched it, and just ignore there were a few people that had issues. And I'm like, I find that hilarious, where you have multiple NFL games coming up around the holidays when watching will be at a massive amount. And then you have WWE going to Netflix beginning in January, and you do not want to buffer with wrestling fans. So I just think it's like kind of, it was interesting. The whole like spectacle of Friday night just brought up so many questions that I think you and I could do a whole podcast on. And
yeah, but you know what?
I would love to see Jake Paul versus Radka Gudas. I would.
Listen, that is on y'all for watching that damn thing. I mean, I'm somebody that's followed. Like, I used to write and cover the UFC and boxing for well, not necessarily a living. It was like a side gig, but nonetheless, like, and even I was just like, listen, like, Jake Paul, for all of his many faults, and the fact that no, he's not a proper professional boxer, is nonetheless a mechanically sufficient boxer. And Mike Tyson is like 80, 90 years old, man. Like, this is, I started watching the other card, and I was like, you know what? I can be reading a book. I could be rewatching Last Action Hero. Anything more interesting than this. So I blame you guys for watching it.
No, I understand. That's a fair criticism, but if you happen to have Netflix, then it was free for you. How's that? That's my counter. Just like Victory Plus is free, and that's a wonderful thing for Stars fans.
I mean, listen, I watch Victory Plus from my desktop. Makes analysis a lot easier. I often have issues on desktop, so I keep these criticisms to myself.
Well, David, how can we find you? At David Castillo on Twitter. The Substack, which you can subscribe to, is at Starstack. And he also writes for D Magazine, my friend. Anything else that we need to know?
Oh, yeah. Two things. Blue Sky, because there is a random migration in order. Not that I'm going anywhere. Just, the point is I'll be even more extremely online than ever before. So Blue Sky. And I have a Discord channel for those that like and even understand what Discord is to begin with.
Okay. All right. So a Discord channel.
By the way, Sean is on it. Sean, Robert, and Steven from 100 Degree Hockey. They're all on my Discord channel. So just saying, there's some heavyweights. It has nothing, you probably don't like me, and that's cool, but you can talk to them.
Wow. Well, hopefully I'd be honored to join it at some point, but I'm just a host. So, all right. On that awkward dismount, David, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And by the way, thank you to, Stick Tap, to all of your listeners and people that send you questions. They're always really good.
Yes.
I love their names as well. And no, I'm not talking about like the real names that I think are funny sounding, like Martin Krooms. You're awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that. I just really appreciate the questions that you get from your Twitter followers.
It's a relationship that I truly enjoy, and I love going back and forth on direct messages and just talking to you guys in general. And by the way, I did want to point out, I was talking to David prior to going on the air tonight about, I mentioned on Saturday night about the Minnesota North Stars. And I'm going to look into that because enough of you Stars fans talked about the North Stars logo and what can be done or why it can be used. So I want to get some official clarification, and we'll probably do a separate podcast on that. And that's what I love is if you guys have any questions or say, that was interesting or anything, it helps us develop future programs. So it's all about you. Like I love doing this program, and I especially love doing these post games when I have people like David or Robert or Sean or Leah or Mike Heika or just just anyone that wants to come on, because I love the conversation. But at the same time, you guys are the ones that make it happen. So if you have any questions or anything like that, just hit me up at GJ Spittle. Mr. Castillo, always a pleasure, sir.
Likewise, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you, one and all Spits and Suds listeners. And we'll be back for another program soon right here on Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.